you all so much for joining us.
All right, thank you, Poppy. And I want to thank everybody for being here this afternoon, because this is really important. So we are here, the whole team is here in Benton Harbor this is the 5th stop on our Thriving Cities tour, 5 out of 17. This is a process where we want to identify how we can improve quality of life for people who live in cities across the state of Michigan. And Michigan's a really big state with a lot of different cities that exist in a lot of different contexts. So that is why the governor and I are making these stops personally to facilitate conversations like this in cities across the state. Thus far, we've been to Detroit, Saginaw, Bay City, and Mesquite. We're here in Benton Harbor, and we're going to go to, again, 12 more cities before we're done. It's going to really touch every part of the state. And in all those conversations, we want to ultimately arrive at what we call a Thriving Cities agenda. And that means an agenda that has practices, programs, and policies that can be implemented at either the local level, the state level, or the federal level to move the ball forward on quality of life. Now, when I'm talking about quality of life, though, you're asking, so what does that mean? That's a very broad phrase. So we are thinking about quality of life in the context of 5 key areas, or 5 buckets, so called. The first is how do we create generational economic opportunity. Second is on affordable and available housing. The third is improving quality of life for kids in cities. The fourth is on environmental justice and quality. And the fifth is related to transportation and mobility. Now, before you get burrowed because you didn't hear your specific thing, we believe that these 5 areas, if we can make improvements in one or more of them, we'll be able to impact a lot. So for example, something that you didn't hear me talk about specifically is criminal justice. That's an area of deep importance to me, something that I and our administration lead on. But we also believe that if we're moving the ball forward on quality of life for kids in cities and generational economic opportunity, that will directly impact people's experience, or hopefully lack of experience, with the criminal justice system. So we believe that every issue can somehow be touched here. Now, but I talked about having sort of specific actions that can be taken to the level. And that's what this conversation needs to be about. Poppy alluded to it, but I want to reiterate it before we get started. There are deep contexts that exist around the current situation that is facing people in Benton Harbor. That context is important, that context is real. And also we believe that policy responses that address that current reality. So I want to make sure that as you are contributing to this conversation, I want you to be focused on, again, what are the things that can be done? What are the programs that can be implemented? What are the policies that can be put in place that we can actually execute on to improve life in these areas? Because at the end of this whole process, we're going to have, yes, a big document that's going to say, here are the things that we heard all across the state. Here are the things that we heard specifically in Benton Harbor. And this is a set of things that the people at the level of Benton Harbor, at the city level, can do. Here are the things that we can do, the governor and I at the state level, through executive action. Here are the things the Michigan legislature can do. And here are things that our federal representatives can do and they can advocate for on our behalf. But all those things have to be policies or programs. They can't just be ideas. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what we mean by thriving cities. So I want to start with the fact, I want to thank everybody for, as part of being here, you were sent a survey to sort of rank those 5 key areas in order of importance. And here in Benton Harbor, 63% of the people who responded to the survey said that either the first or second most important issue out of those 5 was improving quality of life for kids in cities. And just some sort of representative quotes, we see children being forgotten by most of all facets of government because they don't believe that those children matter. We need to meet kids head on and show them that they have objective work to cite. Kids themselves don't see any real progress or representation, even if there are countless specific examples. People really focus on the quality of life of kids in cities and want to see us address that. But let me talk about this specifically because this is important in the context of Benton Harbor. I see Mr. Taylor here. The reason that this bucket is framed as kids in cities and not just education is because while education is important, it is one component of a child's experience in living in the city. And this is really practical for me because, for example, I have 3 kids. I have twin first graders, and I have a baby, a 12-week-old. So her educational experience is really not happening yet outside of our home, in our family, right? But there are other things that impact her quality of life. So we have and are engaged with the board, members of the community, on a specific process to address what's happening within the Harbor Area School in relation with the state mission. This conversation is intended to talk about what are those other components that will exist in parallel with that process to improve the quality of life of kids in cities. I want to call that out specifically because I don't want that to be an elephant in the room, everybody, okay? So nevertheless, again, the number 1 or number 2 most important issue from 63% of the respondents here was quality of life for kids in cities. Now, this slide just shows that there are good things happening in Benton Harbor. There have been positive things happening, just pulling some headlines. The transformation in the waterfront, ideas about how transportation can alleviate and address poverty and persistent and generational poverty in Benton Harbor. Looking at how the Michigan State Police is not going to do chases and high-speed chases in this area, something that's really important. And finally, looking at illegal dumping, something that's a sport for a lot of cities and a lot of communities all across the state. This is just to show that there are positive things that are happening in this city. I want to tell a story of a young woman from Detroit named Jacquees, who has a story that I think really exemplifies what we're trying to talk about. So in the top left, that's Jacquees as a baby, probably about the same age as mine, getting a bath in the sink. I don't know if many of y'all used to do baby in the sink. This is a girl starting out full of life, happy, excited, hungry. You see her coming up through school. She's a basketball player. She went to both public and private schools in the city of Detroit. And then Jacquees in the top left corner. Jacquees had a baby girl when she was 16. And sometimes when that happens, it causes people to have to make tough choices about how they are spending their time to be able to take care of their child. Jacquees was able to continue her education. She finished high school. She went to college at the best university in the state, University of Michigan. I'm not going to apologize for that. She was able to graduate. She went on to law school. She finished law school. That's her graduating from law school with her baby girl in the middle there. She was able to come back and do work, practicing law, but a member of her community, active, got to meet and work with President Obama. She currently helps to manage this fantastic nonprofit called Detroit Soup. And Detroit Soup is this really great model where you invite a bunch of people, and they all pay $5 to come and have a community dinner, right? So imagine you have 50 people in there paying $5 to have a community dinner. And then at the end of the dinner, they hear a presentation from a community organization, and then all the money that was given to those $5 from 50 people, that money goes to that organization to do a project. Really fantastic model. We need everyone. Now, the bottom picture, the last one before it says Jacquees' story, that's the most important one. That is her daughter graduating. She supported her daughter to be able to have this educational opportunity kind of in a similar way she did. But the part that's behind this is really hard. Is Jacquees got $280,000 in student loan debt. Wow. That's crippling. That is more than most houses in Michigan are worth. Okay. So this story is one of resilience. This is one of someone who persevered, who was able to take advantage and get lucky and have good relationships and try to make some things work. But imagine what somebody this hungry, this ambitious, this motivated, this talented, imagine what they could do if there were less barriers to progress. If this girl from a city in Michigan did not have to fight so hard to get what she got, imagine what she could achieve. This is the kind of person that we are trying to empower by improving the quality of life so that her city where she lives can thrive. Now, there are challenges in Benton Harbor, just like there are challenges in the other cities. We have this where they're talking about lead being found in the water supply, flooding in streets, infrastructure, problems at the water treatment plant, bridge repairs, infrastructure. There are things that need to be improved in the city, just like any other place. This is just showing that we have work to do. And this conversation is going to talk about how we're going to do some of that work. So again, when we talk about these 5 buckets, this slide shows kind of the distribution of the answers for who chose which bucket as their number 1 most important issue. So you can see kids in cities with number 1, 42%, followed by access to affordable and available housing, followed by generational economic opportunity, and environmental quality and justice, and transportation and mobility. Now, to be clear, this is listed out as 5 different buckets. We understand that this stuff is related, this stuff is connected. But the reason we asked you to pick one, to force you to make a choice, so we could really try to wrestle out what is the thing you really want to talk about, the thing that we were able to move the ball in this area that could really move us forward in the biggest way. But we realized that I don't want to take away from the interconnected nature of some of these issues, but we tried to force to make a choice. We thought it would scope the conversation. It's a little bit about each bucket. So we define affordable housing, and the way it's defined is that you are a person doesn't have to spend more than 30% of their income on a monthly basis to afford housing. So we have here just some average cost to own or to rent. We have average income, and the average income that it would take to sort of meet that threshold as an owner or a renter. And those bottom 2 numbers are important. So if you need to work 42 hours a week in order to afford to rent an apartment at minimum, at the average income. And the bottom one shows that if you work a minimum wage job, you need to work 60 hours a week. All that means is Benton Harbor does not meet the affordable housing definition threshold. People are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. It means that we have work to do in this area. Generational economic opportunity. Median income in Benton Harbor is $20,157. That is below the state threshold, below the state median income by significant amount. We talk about unemployment in Benton Harbor. We have a very specific definition of unemployment for this particular slide. But it's at 20.8%. Let me tell you what that measures. That measures the number of people who are over the age of 16, who are not retired, and who are actively looking for work. Did I capture that correctly? Okay. I got to check to make sure I don't leave things out. The number of people, or the percentage of people who are over the age of 16, not currently retired, and are currently looking for work. It's important to put those parameters around it because different unemployment numbers can be calculated differently. But this is, we're talking about who is sort of this active workforce and how many of them are currently employed. 185 right now. And the last piece on education, 14% of adults in Benton Harbor have a post-secondary degree. What that means is people have an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, PhD or higher. That does not include people who have some sort of professional certification, some sort of training certificate. It doesn't include this, only talking about degrees. For 14% here, that's also below the state average. So we have work to do to equip people with credentials, equip people with job opportunities, and help them raise their household incomes. Environmental quality and justice. This slide just shows, is meant to just capture the fact that for too many communities in the state, we've had environmental issues, we've had, frankly, companies wreak havoc on the environment, and those havocs have been wreaked adjacent or inside of communities where persistent poverty exists, or people of color. This really clear intersection. And that's led to worse health outcomes, that's led to, whether it was asthma, it's led to increase in people's energy costs associated with that. And it's also led to a reduction in just the amount of spaces that kids can use to go play. We're talking about parks, we're talking about just facilities and resources like that are just less available because of that environmental habit. Now, the kids in cities. This is a comparison, of some state averages when it comes to graduation rate, dropout rate, and the number of children who qualify, proportion of children who qualify for free and reduced lunch. How it compares to the state and in Benton Harbor. Graduation rate is 65% compared to 80%. Dropout rate is 10% compared to almost 9%. And 80% of kids, 4 out of every 5, qualify for free and reduced lunch in Benton Harbor compared to the state average of just under 40%. All that means is, when we're talking about kids at school, again, we still have work to do to help to invest in and support our children. Now, mobility and transportation, this is talking about 3 things. It's talking about the infrastructure, literally the roads and the bridges that are so bad they are dangerous and that we need to invest in fixes. It's talking about access to public transportation and resources because it is expensive to own a car in the state of Michigan. If we have better public transit, people may have more access or different levels of access to opportunity. Access to opportunity like education, healthcare, jobs, etc. And frankly, if we had more use of public transit, we'd have a better economy. Now, we're talking about our administration. I want to talk about some of our priorities and how they intersect with these 5 buckets. On education, we want kids to go to good public schools. We want to invest in our public schools. We want to make sure they're put on a path to having success after they graduate from high school, then have success after graduating from high school. When it comes to transit, we're supporting projects that are innovating in terms of the access to transit for the elderly, access to transit for people who have disabilities, believing that if you can solve the transit challenges of these communities, then those solutions will also work for the broader community. When it comes to clean drinking water, make sure that every community has clean drinking water, that we have money to replace service lines, we do research on not only lead and heavy contaminants, but also PFAS, that we can do the work to reduce the exposure that children have to lead and heavy contaminants in their school buildings. These are things that we want to invest in. When it comes to closing the skills gap, we want to lay the foundation or create a pathway for more people to get training and certification at places like Michigan College, for example. The governor set a goal during State of the State for 60% of adults to have some sort of credential or degree after they graduate from high school. That means moving that number from 14% in Benton Harbor to 60%. So we put in place proposals, things like a program we have called the Michigan Reconnect program we proposed, that provides a tuition-free pathway for any adult to be able to go to a community college or certified training institution and get a credential or certificate in a particular skill. Anything from welding to computer programming to roofing or anything in between. And then when we're talking about roads, yes, this is actually fixing the roads that are dangerous right now. They're so bad they actually break our cars, and making sure that our bridges are safe. Because one of the things that both the governor and I are very concerned about is the state, for example, of our bridges. I don't know if y'all remember, but like 5 or 6 years ago, like a bridge collapsed in Minnesota, and a lot of people died. We don't want that to happen. Right now, we have too many bridges in the state of Michigan that are in dangerous condition. We need to invest in our infrastructure to prevent that not possible. So, this slide talks about our city's agenda, but really it's a conversation about your city's agenda. This is about how you believe that we need to work together to move the ball forward in one or more of these areas. So, what I want to talk about, so this is the email address that you referred to earlier, MIEOG-Thriving Cities. This is the one that you email us when you have more information that you want to get, or more importantly, more information that you want to contribute, more ideas you think about after this conversation is over. If you want other people to participate in the conversation who are not able to be here, have them send a message to that address as well. This is what I would characterize as our public comment mechanism alongside. So please utilize it. As we get started in the conversation, I'd like to invite someone who chose the quality of life for kids in cities being the most important issue to them to open us up with a comment on, again, what sort of practice, program, or policy that can be implemented at the city level, the state level, or the federal level. What's something that you want to see done specifically that can improve the quality of life for kids in Benton Harbor? Who will go first? I'll go first. Thank you so much.
So, I have been working with or trying to get some type of program started, especially in the high school area, where you get students who may not be economically, educationally going to go off to college or may not see that as their first option, to have some sort of a job training program in the city. Meaning, like, if you are a carpenter, if you are an electrician, and you fix houses, you would then find students in that high school who want to work with you. You will give them a summer job, some type of summer program to work on houses. You partner with the city in that aspect, and the city then goes to find all the houses that are blighted, that are run down. We start building up those houses to get property taxes to be coming into the city and get more people in houses. But I just need more help from the community to figure out who are these people that are going to train these students. How do we reach out to the students, and also how do we get the city to agree to start taking these houses that are blighted and to move them into a more economically advantageous area.
Okay, so I heard a couple things in there. I heard connecting high school students to summer job opportunities. I heard that either being in itself or feeding into some kind of training program that exists for those students. And then working to address blighted properties in the city. Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. Other ideas, please.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
I think that we should invest in early literacy. For the last 3.5 years, my organization, along with another organization I'm a part of, the Benton Rotary Club, we have been invested in mobile technology for students who are below grade level in elementary school. And for the last year, we have seen a modest improvement in their academics due to these devices.
Okay, so early literacy specifically is something that we as administration share as well, so I appreciate that. And the program still you talked about was something that was leveraging mobile devices. Is that an existing program?
Yes.
So that as an example, so you should email this email address with information about that program, so we can understand it.
I will.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to remind people, when you stand up to speak, if you could share with us your name, and if you're here representing an organization, that would be super helpful too. But if you're not here representing an organization, that's okay, but we just love to hear that.
Thank you, Bob.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Representative Benton, also to Benton Harbor Community Water Station that we're created something to test water. Matter of fact, when the water first was going bad here, we was the ones that I tested the water to determine how bad it was, how much lead was in it, and we sent it to the University of Michigan, which is something you might know about. To test the water to make sure that the water was good. We discovered that the first 40 that we tested, 33 of them was filled with lead, and then we tested another 150, and 133 was filled with lead. And I think this is the opportunity for our children to come in and set up a water station at our building, where we can test the water ourselves to know how bad the water is. Also, we're training people. We would like this Pittsburgh said about people being, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, pipe fitters. We would like to be part of that for our students. We've been training last year for people to be able to do these things, but I think the water is one of the biggest things that we need. I think it's the root of the problem here in the city. Our children, minds are filled with lead, their bodies are filled with lead. So we got to stop it right there in order to make sure that our children are able to understand and comprehend what's going on. So I believe that is one of the things that we need to. Also, I would say that we should set up a program where the government can provide water, drinking water for the people here until the water gets better. We have helped the board of the Benton County Health Department to pass out water filters, but we understand, that's just a band-aid to the problem. You see, that won't fix the problem, you see, but we want to make sure that we fix the problem.
I want to say this with the hopes that somebody will give me some feedback along the way as to what I need to do, maybe on a legislative policy, leadership level. Listening to the young man here, I think a lot of people don't understand that the county has torn down a lot of blighted properties, and some of it that's boarded up that's still blighted now belongs to people that probably live in somewhere else and just are property owners and continue to pay their taxes. And we just, as community leaders, can't go and fix up some private person's property with the hopes that they would rent it out for a reasonable price. That's not the way government is set up to work. But with training of, no disrespect to LMC, because I encourage people to go to college. Go to a university if you can. But for those, and I've met some, actually up at the replication of Manchester, Bidwell, and Grand Rapids, there was a young college student there that went to a college across town, and I asked her was she there, and I actually recorded her. She said because the college didn't offer the class that they had over here. And that should be readily available in the heart of the city of Benton Harbor. Because that way we don't have to worry about people traveling too far down roads in cars that are torn anyway. And when we talk about infrastructure, I thought that we were talking about what's underneath not the Band-Aid that needs to be put on top, the surface. I mean, training of all of that plays a large part in training period, and I'm glad to hear you say that the state is actually working on those type of levels of education and willing to pay. Does that mean that they're willing to pay some of our youth that are interested in moving earth movers, sending them to Wisconsin to the CAC school? I mean, those type of things I need to know. I truly just do. To make things work.
So the specific program that we refer somebody to get trained in Michigan.
Okay, well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's where partnershiping comes in. Partnershiping with people like them to partner with a local contractor that's willing to take on the youth and train them. Because they are the ones, because everybody in this room, with the exception of one or two, is getting older. They are going to have to rebuild America. Okay, but even your those are going to be the right mind that rebuild America because she's crumbling. And that includes the water, what's underneath us that we stand on, not just putting a Band-Aid on the surface that we drive on. Yeah.
I hear that. I appreciate that. So I think it seems like there is a conversation we had about what is the specific role that's played at every level of government when it comes to this sort of enabling these kind of training opportunities. Like I said, at the state level, so we put on the table a proposal that would handle the tuition costs for training. And that's something we're going to fight for in the budget negotiation process that we're involved in right now. But it is an open question, so I would ask that to the folks as a way of continuing on these kids in cities, like, what kind of training opportunities, how can the city, how can the county create more provisions for that?
Or even our schools.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so I submitted a pipeline to Peace and Prosperity Project, it's very comprehensive and it deals with all of that, so that would be a long conversation, I'll just try to put it through.
Okay.
Okay, so how is the idea is one, if these black communities are continuously overlooked, then I recommend having a cabinet position that specifically addresses the needs of black communities. A racial equity, relief, recovery, and reform officer with the governor's ear, who also connects with other officers throughout the state, both at the school level and the municipality level. Does that make sense? So that means that officer is addressing those issues on a regular basis and being more proactive as opposed to responding to problems. The other thing is the way that schools are being financed, especially cash-strapped schools, is creating an ongoing problem which puts them further in debt. So instead of putting a price on the student's head and then having these schools go into debt and taking out loans, change the way that they're being financed. Think of an ideal class size and then pay based on that class size per school. That'll prevent that issue. The other thing is looking at the $4 billion that was misappropriated through Snyder's administration and identifying some type of way to bring that back to K-12 funding and giving maybe those black schools that were hit hardest 30% off the top and taking that off of the debt. So there's a lot of other issues in the project plan that talks about training and all of that, but those are policy sectors.
I appreciate all that. There's a lot to unpack. I want to respond to one thing specifically, about how schools are funded. So Michigan, the state of Michigan made a choice like 25 years ago how we were going to fund schools with something called Pope Pay, which is sort of what set up our property tax-based school financing system. And in the negotiation around next year's budget, so we're working within that framework to try to increase funding for education, whether it's on per pupil or additional investments for special education or for intensive education, et cetera. But there is a broader conversation to be had about whether this property tax-based system actually works, and sort of what inequities has it led to. I think it's fair to say that it's led to some tremendous ones, and that we need to revisit that. And that's a conversation we're willing to have, and that's a different, sort of separate from the budget conversation. But that's a conversation that we think needs to happen.
Shut down completely off the table.
Pardon me?
Schools take shut down completely off the table.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm coming across this way. All right, so let's go.
pregnancy problem. We need a comprehensive and intense teen pregnancy prevention and sexually transmitted disease prevention program. But for the kids who do have children, there also needs to be very intense parenting programs for young people. Because, in working for the Department of Health and Human Services, there was a cycle. There is a big cycle in this area where you see the same families over and over. You see the person who was your kid on your caseload later on be the mom on your caseload or the dad on your caseload. And so we have to change that. There needs to be something that starts from the time they're babies, that people are teaching people how to parent babies. Because when you have young people who are having babies, a lot of times they just don't have that education to know exactly what's put into children. And the first few months of a child's life are so important in development. And so I think that that's something that is in desperate need around here. We have a very high teen pregnancy rate.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Rhonda Williams, RJ for short. I work for the Boys and Girls Club, but I am a native of Benton, Harlem, Michigan. And I see a lot, one thing that I just know that really should be intentional is financial literacy. And one summer, probably last summer and a little bit this summer, every Monday we did Money Matters with our teens. But it's hard to kind of educate them on financial literacy if they're not seeing it at home. So I'm wondering if at the local or even the county level in some of the housing complexes that is mandatory, that they do have financial literacy classes so we can break the generational curses of being financially illiterate.
One of the things that that's noticeable, as a city, even though it's economically strapped, we are able to generate revenue as evidenced by city tax that produces, as of right now, over $2 million for us that's been designated for the roads. Now, that's a local issue that can be redesignated as far as how the money is spent, but that's what was promised to the people. What the concern is that, is it possible from a state perspective, because it controls the type of money that can be raised in order to be able to apply it towards different things, where we are designated to roads and cities, roads and communities, which is an infrastructure issue, which one could argue is a responsibility of the state and at least local and county levels, that if you can provide information that shows that the money that you are spending can be redirected towards your five priorities, that you set up some type of fund where reimbursement can be submitted for those funds that were spent for infrastructure improvement in order to be able to take those things and reallocate them to like youth programs, setting things that are not just non-profit based, but that are actually city and community based, that allows you to say, if you can show that the funds that we are reimbursing are being put back into our five buckets, then we will reimburse you on those costs, whether it be at the state level or federal funds that have been redistributed for a local level. And I think that will help us improve some of the services that we're able to provide, not just for the youth on the actual specific issues, but in some of those other areas that you have as well too. Because funding, if a poor community is taking the initiative to say, we will come up with ways to solve our own problems financially, but you have to also realize and understand we are economically strapped. Then if we can show, hey, some of those issues that may have been taken care of at the county level or at the state level, if you take the initiative to repair those, then we will in turn provide you up to whatever point it could be some reimbursement for those funds.
Hi, my name is Zaccharia. One of the things that, like, dealing with the kids and talking to them, lately, well, like the past couple of years, a lot of younger parents have been dying. And these children, you know, they've been left to grieve, but there's really no grieving counseling. A lot of people don't go to church like they used to, so a lot of the younger men or young women, they don't know how to cope, and sometimes they're acting out because they don't know how to cope and they have anybody to talk to. You don't really have the counselors to go to like we used to. So I think implementing some type of grieving program or just something, a go-to for you besides just church, a go-to for the young people that are grieving from loss of parents or grandparents and things like that. And then sometimes it's implementing something for those children that are losing parents, some type of program where they can get help for, like you may be a senior, Johnson's and stuff like that. They'll go to that program, specific program that'll help them with funding for things like that, because that's a lot of the needs that I'm seeing. As generations pass, the academics change and the needs change for the children. So I think that we should start, when we do these type of things, start including the children, getting at least 10 or 20 children and hearing from them, because one thing about children, they are genuine and they're honest, because they haven't learned how to, be phony yet. Children are just genuine. So start listening to the children and asking them what their needs are. As she said, we used to have sex can wait program when I was in school, and it was like our peers. If I was in 7th grade, it was probably like a team from the high school that would come to our school and talk about sex can wait. But when we saw our peers and we saw cool people talking about it, we thought it was cool to wait on sex. Right now, social media is kind of like raising our kids. Social media is like more prominent than us. I can say one thing, but if my child sees it on social media, they think it's okay. So finding those popular people or those people in the communities, some type of way to show them, the children, that doing the right thing can be cool. You don't have to not be cool and when you, just because you're going to school and you're getting good grades and things like that. And lastly, we just need more after school programs, more things for the children to get into besides sports. I have 3 sons. One of my sons, he's an all-star, but I have a 7th grader right now. He was like, Mom, I want to do something. He don't have anything. It's no programs to really put him into. So implementing more programs, especially geared towards young men. A lot of our young men are lost. We have a lot of women leaders. We got a lot of women doing things, but for some reason in this community specifically, our young men are being looked over, and they don't have a lot of, you got 3 or 4, role models for them to look up to. So implementing some type of programs geared towards young men in our community.
I appreciate that.
Can I address her?
Okay, all right, I'll come here.
My name is Rodney Gully. I'm the president of Southwest Michigan Ministerial Alliance. And she mentioned the church involvement. I would like to offer or extend an invitation to anyone in the community to come to us as a body, and then we will assist in those moral areas where we are failing in this community. We cannot solve all the problems at once, but there was a time in this community that when I grew up, I'm 70 years old, I'll be 71 in 18 days if I live. When I grew up in this community, the church was a major factor in developing the morality of our community and also the mentoring of young men in our community. It is very difficult for us as a church to mentor in the way we used to, because they would come to church. So we're willing to extend an invitation to the community. What can we do as a Southwest Michigan Ministerial Alliance to mentor the young ladies, to mentor the young men, and also to offer some sort of assistance in grief counseling? My grandchildren lost their dad when they were 5 and 8 years old. My son was murdered. Fortunately, they had me and my wife in order to mentor and to input in their lives morality and direction in life. My grandson now is the head of his plant in Elkhart, Indiana. My granddaughter is married and works a professional job along with her husband. But this doesn't happen automatically. In this community, we have children that are just start off being really mistreated. It's really mean the way you see babies being talked to, mistreated, then they grow up and they're abandoned. And this is a need in our community that we have to, as a community, not point fingers, but everybody play a part. The church and the community play a part in trying to improve the lives of our children. I heard a story about a young lady. Her mother was a teenage mother, and she left home when she was 15 years old. And a man saw her and thought he had hit the lotto because he was a street man. And he wanted to put her on the streets, and he did. When the mother found out who it was the girl's own father. This is a type of things that are happening to children, and it's a bitter situation. So we have a job to do as ministers in this community, in the moral sense, to reach out to our children. They're hurting. Allow us to help. We're willing to help, but we cannot help if you don't allow us or you don't let us in. And we really want to do that. We want to improve the morality of our community. We want our community moral. We want our community safe. We want our children safe. And it hurts my heart when I see what's happening to children. And that's my comment to respond to her.
Thank you. I'm sorry that happened.
Okay, sure. Okay, I'm Tracy Benton. I am a community entrepreneur, and I'm currently contracted through Benton Harbor Area Schools providing family and community service. So I have three main areas. So the first one is definitely early literacy. I think that if we truly invest in that 0 to 3 age group, then a lot of the things that we're seeing now, we can live right in the world. And so I have this thing we're starting, it's called Project Literature, but lit is big. Because we have to speak the kids' language, and that's basically hip-hop pedagogy. If we talk their language, we can deliver those services properly. So basically, you put it at the intersection of culturally sustaining pedagogy, hip-hop pedagogy, put it in the rap and teach kids the ABCs. Number 2 is cultural competence. I think Benton Harbor is such a small community, and we have a lot of different service-providing organizations that are out of touch with the actual pulse of the people that they serve. So it's not pointing fingers or blaming anyone, it's just that as someone who didn't, I, even as a black woman, had to become culturally competent because I grew up in the outskirts of the city. So coming in and talking to children or whatever, I needed to know about this city. And no matter what city I go to, if I decide to move to Detroit tomorrow, I'm gonna have to become culturally competent. So something at a city level where we understand what is Benton Harbor, not the statistics that we read, but how can we actually deliver services properly to the people that are right in front of us. Number 3 is access to funding. So one of the main barriers that I found coming home with a degree with all of these great ideas, I didn't necessarily know where to find the funding to put forth these great ideas. And it seems like it's a secret society, I don't know. But I want to know how to tap into those resources because, you know, it's all my millennial friends that I'm about to say. Yeah, so we have really great ideas, and we want to be able to share those ideas with the community, and we want to also have the proper funding to run them.
Thank you. Thank you for being here also. I would like to see, as far as the kids are concerned, something on the local and the state level as far as policies. I deal with people who are incarcerated, and I see a lot of those parents, kids that are left really unattended or in foster care. We have a large foster care system with no accountability. There's no real checks and balances. And I'm talking about even coming into the Benton Harbor area. One example, I had a young lady from Coloma, and she was put into the Benton Harbor foster care system. Her and her brother and her sister, every time she misbehaved, she was put into a dog cage. And I know that to be factual. And every time her brother misbehaved, he was made to eat his own bowel movement. Even though the court systems knew it, there's no checks and balances locally because, again, when complaints are filed, it's basically retaliatory. So the checks and balances as far as the foster care and the PTSD that our kids suffer in this area, the trauma It's not really addressed, it's talked about, but it's skimmed over, because when we look at our kids misbehaving, it's not only just lead, but there's a lot of PTSD talked about molestation, and I know that if I had 20 girls in the class, at least 10 have been molested. The courts could care less about where you've been, they just care about what you did, and there is no checks and balances as far as our kids are concerned. They're treated like objects instead of resources, and when we treat kids like they're just an object and not a resource, they don't get the education that they deserve. They don't get the necessary services because we don't have time to do like root cause to see what the real issues are. And so what we do is we blame, and we don't do stigma. We have so much stigma labels over this city and over our school districts and stuff that when people automatically hear Benton Harbor, it's associated with the stigma. So we don't even have training to reduce the stigma concerning just the cultural sensitivity that goes along with the addiction. All of this plays into why we have such high levels of addiction, but PTSD is really high. Human trafficking, we have a police officer here. Human trafficking is extremely high. If we don't pick them up coming from the jail at 5 o'clock in the morning, they have people waiting for them. And some of those kids or some of those young people never get home for months and months. And anytime you address certain things, if we don't have relationships, I mean, it's kind of hard to get up every morning. And then people know who the individuals are. But again, if we don't put policies in place that we have local agreements that certain things are not going to be allowed, and when you know you have the right and you have the obligation to report it without worrying about retaliation, and that some of these kids can get the real help that they need, because they're not bad kids. They're good kids. But then again, if you have to go home with some of the kids, you would understand. But if you've never sat with somebody you'll never feel what they feel. Thank you.
I appreciate that. This comes in a couple of different ways. What I would classify as just like support services, particularly for people who need support regarding their mental and emotional health or status. So I'll actually want to say. So one of the things that we are very interested in as administration is looking at how we can rebuild the state of Michigan's infrastructure in that vein, something that's been underinvested in for going on about 30 years now. And one of the areas that I see it most is in my criminal justice work. So I'm the co-chair of a task force on pretrial incarceration that's looking at the county jail system. And we have seen in the state of Michigan that the county jail system has become one of the larger providers of mental health services in most parts of the state. But that system was not designed for that purpose. So I agree that there's a tremendous amount of work to do for children and adults in that area, and that's something really important. So I appreciate you bringing that to this conversation. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. My name is Louisa Orr, and I'm here representing Michigan Works. And so I have a couple of things that I want to touch on. The first one is with regards to training services. I do sometimes feel like we're a hidden treasure. People don't necessarily know that we exist, but we have youth training services available. So I would encourage anyone, I'll leave some business cards at the end of this meeting. If you have youth that are interested in training, please send them our way, and we will look to do what is called an interest inventory to decide what is the best pathway for them to follow. Secondly, and backing off of Marlita back there, mental health services are needed in this community. Before we can move forward, we have to treat the individuals, especially our youth, as a whole, and look at what encompasses that youth, that kid, right? And so they can come to me for GED services, and I can get them a GED, but if I'm not addressing the underlying barriers that each kid has, I'm not gonna get anywhere. It'll be a continuous cycle. I've heard Band-Aid, that's it, it's a Band-Aid. So we need to really bring mental health, behavioral health services to the kids in Benton Harbor. As a policy, I would love to see schools have mental health counseling, additional mental health counseling. And
Could you speak a little louder?
So we've been talking about, I will appreciate that. So we've been talking about kids in cities specifically in terms of improving quality of life. I do want to open up some space for people for whom they did not choose that as their number one issue. Maybe you chose affordable available housing, maybe you chose environmental quality and justice. I just want to open this up as part of this conversation for you to be able to speak to that issue. But I want you to do so in a way that one focuses again on a program or practice or a policy, but also does connect to this issue that the majority of people said they want to talk about. So how would you connect environmental quality and justice in kids and cities? Or how would you connect affordable and available housing in kids and cities? So I know we got a couple people here, but I want to make sure that if you haven't spoken yet, because kids and cities was not your number one thing, I want to make sure you have that opportunity to do so.
I can't help but to touch base on this because this young lady right here, she said quite a bit. And then listening to this young lady after our pastor over here, we have, that's what really made me get involved because it seemed like there was some type of secret society or something going on because I knew that money was coming to Benton Harbor and it was not going through Benton Harbor. But too many times and too often we have money that comes in here and then there's a program designed. This is what I shared with Al Bashoka when he was running for office before he created himself one. The facilitators get paid, but nothing yet goes solved. The facilitators get paid, the problem still persists. We have a bunch of children in our community with it being a 4-mile square radius of 10,000 or less. And yes, the data would state that it's high, but if we were 100,000, you wouldn't know. The pregnancy teen rate is happening everywhere. It's just smaller, that's all. Same thing is happening everywhere else. But it is a problem, generational curses that need to be broke. We need our ministerial alliance to help come together and bring together one big church and get some vans and get these kids whose families have parents or somebody that have gone to prison, take them to visit them, that they can help them mentally to get back on track. You would be surprised at the love that they would have for you all if you would do that on the inside. That secret society, it does exist. Because I've been to so many of these right here, many people show up just to see what's in it for them. Where's the money? Before they try to sidetrack us that need to solve the problems to get involved. We're working on some things, and yet I've watched for a good 20 years block grant dollars be diverted to what the establishment wants, as opposed to what it comes into this community for. And yet the children suffer. Now, how can we put policies together to stop the programming and to get that money to come directly into something to solve the problem that we already know that exists? Anybody?
Touching on some of the other things that people wanted to trigger something on, from a policy perspective and even a legislative one, the cash bail system here, specifically in our neck of the woods, I don't understand how prosecutors or whoever establishes it expects the poor city in Michigan, some of the residents that are there for traffic violations, things of that nature, to come up with what they don't have in the first place in order to have the freedom in order to make money. So the cash bail system is definitely something that needs to be looked at. They even have to pay for it. If they're in home incarceration, have to pay for their own monitoring during home incarceration, which, okay, I get it, but I don't. The next one is the legal age has to go to 18. We have children that are here that are being prosecuted as adults at the age of 17 here right now, and that's being kept on their records, so on and so forth. And the Supreme Court has already ruled and said, hey, anything that's happened under the age of 17, as far as lifelong, you know that piece. So that's already been reversed, but we need that legal age to come up to 18. Automatic marijuana expungement for some of our people who are here that are under the age of 18. Now that this is legal in the state of Michigan, we need to try to rectify some of those criminal things that are on their record that are affecting them that are technically no longer considered crimes. Now, I know the legal age is 21, but sometimes you have to crawl before you can run. And I just say, if you hit 18, if you have a marijuana conviction on your record, that it shouldn't be something that you have to petition to do. It should just something that automatically happens. So, because a lot of our children simply don't know. They're in there with prosecutors pleading the cases to felonies, but they just don't know that that's what they were supposed to do. So we run into that a lot of times with the resisting and obstruction. I only know this because I look at a lot of the court convictions that come out, and they're like, how did all these resisting and obstruction arrests? And then you look, and there's no other crimes that are associated with that particular action except for resisting and obstructing arrest. So those are things that they carry with them that keep them out of the workforce, that feeds into the problems that we have. And then the other thing is, beyond that, to touch on some of the other things, is our communities, our small business leaders here need to learn how to have access to do business with the state of Michigan. They don't know how to go in and get trained up in order to get all the various certifications that they need in order to access that particular resource, or how to do business with local and private companies that are here. That because that information has kind of been shielded, to kind of touch on what Ms. Burton said, if the information is being shielded or not readily available, you don't know how to go and say, I want to do business with the state of Michigan, so this is the things that I need to have in order to be able to conduct that. You don't know how to go and say, I want to do business with the city of Ben Harbor, so this is what I need to do so my business can make money from that. So we do need that training, resource, and piece. And then the other thing that I would say is that if we know that the state of Michigan is going to be here, and we're talking about programs in the summer, doing work, infrastructure, things of that nature, the upgrades, that they invest in particular Berrien County into some type of summer program resource facility that directly translates into the jobs that the state of Michigan needs done in this particular neck of the woods. And this has happened. So I know Michigan Department of Transportation does some summer programming that invites local residents to go there as well too. I would ask that expanded upon to some of the other things as far as things are being referenced, construction and things of that nature. So.
Yes, I appreciate that. So you touched on three things related to criminal justice. I just want to respond to those because all of those, whether that's cash bail or just really sort of defines the fee structure in and of itself, record expungement on marijuana, but also expungement more broadly, and also raise the age. Those are all three issues where there's currently legislation in the Michigan legislature being moved by Democrats that we're trying to work through the Republican-led legislature. So advocacy on those three things is very important. And all three things in principle our administration supports wholeheartedly. It's something that I'm actually working on all three of those things specifically. So that's important if you're communities across the state, although in particular hard-hit communities, mostly Black communities. Where if you look at like the city I live in Detroit, you got upwards of approximately 40% of Black men who have a record because of these sorts of things. And so looking at those directly. The second piece related to state contract. So it has been proven historically that one of the sort of most viable ways to grow a small business is by being able to win or participate in government contracts at any level, city, county, state, etc. On Governor Whitmer-Knott's third day in office, we enacted an executive directive that is designed to reduce the barriers for women, minority-owned, veterans, service-disabled, etc. people who have businesses to have more access to the contracting process, to have that process be more transparent and responsive so that pathway will be more viable. And that includes being more clear and transparent about what the requirements are, what the bonding requirements are for construction projects and things like that. And also connecting people with resources to get to that, to be able to qualify for that. It's something that's a priority for our administration. That's what we did on day 3. That was like January 4th. So we've been working on implementing that because that is an important way. And we think that connects to the generational economic opportunities, type of things that we're describing, so that being a bucket for how we can grow and how people can thrive. So I appreciate those. How are we doing on time?
I was just gonna say, we have about 5 minutes left.
All right, 5 minutes. So, yes.
Hey, how you doing? Saturday.
You get your name.
Huh? Marvin Haywood. Saturday I attended a meeting in Detroit that was geared toward the statewide for dismounting of the school system. There was a resolution that was put forth and supported in Ben Harbor called the Fresh Start Resolution.
I know that Dana Nessler and Ms. Pugh, went against, the governor's office when it came to closing the Benton Harbor area schools. So what I'm trying to find out now is where do you all stand with the Fresh Start proposal and the petition that was signed by like 15,000 people to give the school a fresh start. It was adopted by the board, but there was a piece of information that was took out before it was put forth. And because the Attorney General and a few of the state board members went against you all, I'm wondering now if you all have a different position on it. I know that we'll be going to court, the city of Detroit will be going to court on October 25th in regards to the same thing when it deals with cities that have been underprivileged. And I know that you all said that you support the member that some cities, due to economics and various other things, didn't deserve a right to a quality education. So I'm trying to figure out where do you all stand now on getting the Fresh Start resolution that was put forth by the city of Benton Harbor community, students, parents, and I don't know if you've read the Fresh Start resolution, but it's been supported by a lot of people. We've had nationwide, it's been getting nationwide attention from the Washington Post, New York News, and the Detroit Free Press as well. So where do you all stand on that specific issue with the Fresh Start resolution?
So, I addressed this earlier, so I'll reiterate what I said. So the direct answer to your question is I don't know what the Fresh Start resolution is.
Okay.
But what I do know is that there has been a process working with the Board of Education, or the Benton Harbor Area School Board here, and the state of Michigan to move forward on the future Benton Harbor Area School. We continue to support that process. That's in parallel to this conversation where we're talking about how can we improve quality of life for children in cities. And so that process is something that we support. We're happy to be working with the board on that. And I will go forward.
A spin-off, let me say one thing. You rejected the last plan. Now I can understand why, because there was language in there that spoke on closing up the schools. When we know there was benchmarks in that last plan that were unachievable. Also, there was information that said putting a tax on the people in the city of Benton Harbor for a debt that was created by others. Has there been any action on doing a forensic audit on the $18 million to find out if all of the deliverables that was supposed to be delivered was delivered, and the people that were state consultants, and anybody that had a view of spending that $18 million can be held accountable? That's one of the things, because they did state that in the school board proposals that they wanted a forensic audit. Has that been done, or do you know if that's been passed on to Dana Nessler or the Attorney General's office in Detroit in regards to that?
So
The $18 million forensic audit. So that's $18 million.
I was gonna address
I just want to address this issue. So,
Okay.
We hear your concerns. I'm willing to have a conversation with you, answering your very specific questions.
Okay.
But in answer to you, we currently, from the state's perspective, have the Treasury Department working very closely with the Board of Education here in Benton Harbor.
Okay.
So, and our legislature is not empowered to act on the Fresh Start resolution. So while that does tell you who supports those kinds of efforts, it doesn't really tell you what we can do from the legislative perspective. So I just wanted to say that. So I'm willing to answer your questions very directly. The goal for this meeting was to talk about these other 5 priority areas, and we really want to protect that time because we haven't had time to do that as a community.
All right.
Did you want to add anything?
I wanted before you follow, I wanted to answer another part of your initial question, which was about the lawsuit from the city, from Detroit, about children's right to read. That was filed against the previous administration, and it's going through a process, but that was not something that this administration thought that kids don't have a right to a quality education. That was filed during the Snyder administration.
Okay.
It is going through the process, and I'm not disputing that, but I wanted to make it very clear that that was not, that was a holdover from the previous administration.
Okay, one more thing, they had offered $11 million if we closed the school.
Okay, it's a specific question to the school district. I'm
Okay.
happy to answer your question.
All right, I'll give you
but
a
we're not
copy or a call.
perfect.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so, go ahead. Lieutenant Governor, did you have?
One last thing. I didn't introduce myself first. My name is Shokwe Pitchford, and I am heavily considering running for the 79th District House of Representatives. And I just wanted to make a statement because I talked to Tracy a long time ago, not that long ago, a couple months, and we we have probably one of the best conversations ever about where to take this city forward with Eleanor. I've been working with literally everybody in the city. And I want to say to the two young men sitting in the back and anybody else who wants to move on this progressive journey forward, it is our time. It is our time to change the discourse of this area, but we cannot do it without the vanguard, without the bulwark, without the people that came before us. We need all of these ideas, but frankly, I'm sick and tired of talking about things. People have been telling me that we've been talking about these same issues for 20 years, and I refuse to be 40 years old and still talking about So yes, I do want to again thank both of you because I know you have the best interest for Benton Harbor at heart, but just to know that everybody in Benton Harbor may not have the best idea for Benton Harbor going forward. So working with us, working with the progressive future, you're on board or you're not.
That's right.
And that's just the way I'm gonna simply put it. We don't have time to wait. All of these things that we brought up, all these statistics, kids are dying. People are dying. We don't have time to do petty political arguments going back and forth. It is time to change the discourse of this area, and we're going to do that together. Thank you.
All right, we got time for 2 more.
No, we don't.
We're gonna let y'all do the wrap up. Okay, well, if that's the case, then I want to recognize Apollonia again. This is a team effort to be out here, and in order to be deeply engaged, it takes a lot of people. It takes you participating, it takes us coming to the table with big ears and big eyes and big hearts. And so we appreciate your willingness to converse with and engage with us. And this is how this starts. You talk about not wanting to wait 20 years. I got little babies. I'm only 36. I don't want to wait any longer either. That's part of why I said it.